Hello and welcome to this tutorial, which is a summary of cognitivism and the work of Piaget. Cognitive theory defines learning as a semi-permanent change in mental processes or associations. Cognitivists do not require outward exhibition of learning, but focus more on the internal processes and connections that take place during learning. These internal processes are the cognitive processes. Important classroom principles in cognitive psychology includes meaningful learning or giving meaning to learning, organisation and elaboration. Cognitive theories grew in response to behaviourism and stressed that learning is not always indicated by behaviour and that learning is an internal process associating previous knowledge with the new information building thereon. There are 3 stages to cognitive learning. First, there is input or attention, where the learner receives information. Second is the process of encoding, where the information is translated into a meaningful form which can be remembered. Finally, there is output or retrieval, where identifying and recording information for a particular purpose is used. To summarise, children and young people will construct their own meaning from experiences. The theory classes learning as a search for meaning. Meaning itself requires understanding of concepts, even small ones. An example of a small concept may be addition, where you show an SEN student an apple and associate that with the number 1. You then show them another apple so that they can then associate that together with the first apple as the number 2. This seems an easy concept, but teachers need to understand and consider the assumptions that pupils might make independently and make sure that any incorrect assumptions are identified and addressed. The cognitive theory does lead to higher levels of learning because students have to construct their own meaning rather than simply memorise. Let's now look at the work of Jean Piaget, who is probably the most well-known educational theorist amongst teachers, but he is also known as a constructivist. He concluded that cognitive development was an aspect of children's adaptation to their physical and social environment. Over time, exposure to new features of the environment led to further adaptation. Children's cognitive development is linear, progressing through 4 increasingly complex stages. The key areas to Piaget's theory are schema or schemes, which include assimilation and accommodation. Piaget concluded that children are actively engaged in the learning process and that there are developmental stages for the children which are age-defined. Piaget proposed we construct knowledge into schemes or schemas. Schemas are ideas and actions used to interpret and understand the world. New knowledge is either assimilated, which is the process of interpreting new experiences by incorporating them into an existing scheme, or it is accommodated, which is the process of modifying existing schemes in order to incorporate or adapt new experiences. Let's put that into context. Many young people with profound learning disability explore their world by banging objects on different surfaces to explore those surfaces. This is an example of a schema or scheme. And assimilation occurs when a new object is successfully used, for example, substituting a ball for a building block. Accommodation occurs when a new object does not fit that scheme. For example, if we substitute the building block for an egg that breaks, it can no longer be used to examine the world in the same way. Another example is when a young person sees a dolphin swimming. The young person assimilates that knowledge into a previous scheme of seeing fish and concludes that a dolphin is a fish. However, when the young person sees the way the dolphin breathes, they now accommodate that knowledge into a new scheme or concept, concluding that they are animals that swim in water but breathe air like people. Piaget looked at different stages of a child's development and concluded that they reflect an underlying mental structure in relation to their age. He described it as being in a state of equilibrium, equilibrium being the force which drives the learning process, for example, a motivation to learn to their current age level. Learning must follow the order developed by Piaget. It can't skip stages and is found in all cultures. Now let's look closely at Piaget's stages. From birth to approximately 2 years is the sensory motor stage, where a young child will differentiate themselves from objects. They develop the knowledge of touch, smell, sight and taste. They recognise objects exist, even when they are no longer in their presence. They often demonstrate this by looking for favourite toys or their mother. The next stage is from 2 to about 7 years of age, which is the pre-operational stage, where children begin to learn language and represent objects by words and images. They will still have difficulty understanding the viewpoints of others and difficulty understanding the changes in the appearance of matter like melting ice. This is known as the concept of conservation. From From the age of about 7 to 11 years, a young person would enter the concrete operational stage. They can now think logically about objects and events. They can now use logical rules to solve problems, and objects can be ordered according to features such as height, weight, or speed. The concept of conservation is developed and grasped. The formal operational stage is from 11 years onwards, where thinking becomes more flexible. Young people can think logically about an abstract concept, and thinking becomes more symbolic, like being able to cope with such things as algebra. At this age, they become concerned with the hypothetical and the future. It's logical that teachers should tailor learning to meet the child's readiness to learn. According to Piaget, they won't be ready unless they are in the right stage. Piaget encouraged learning to be constructive and active with an emphasis on practical activities, the teacher being the facilitator rather than an instructor. The materials and learning activities should help children to construct learning and to progress from discovery to discovery. There are, however, criticisms of Piaget's theory in that it underestimates or overestimates abilities within stages, and as a result, it is too structured in its thinking rather than being individualised. There's no allowance or transitional element to the theory, so no indication as to how children and young people progress to the next stage. The role of the teacher is underestimated, and it ignores cultural inferences. In practice, children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities often do not fit into Piaget's stages. I'd like to suggest 3 further web pages to have a look at: the Limitless Learning webpage, Teaching Learning Resources by PB Works, and Simply Psychology, where Piaget is discussed. The links are provided in the accompanying slides. Thank you.